Hello and welcome to Hot Issues. This week, we are taking a look at the minority and its contribution to good governance. We are going to take you through all the major issues which have been raised by the minority over the last couple of months. Welcome to Hot Issues. Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues, and we are taking a look at the minority in Parliament and its contribution to good governance. We're going to take a look at several issues which have been raised by the minority, and we are especially privileged to have with us in the studio the minority leader himself, Honorable Kyei Mensa Bonsu. Sir, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me, Ikusi.
Broadly, what is the contribution of the minority to good governance?
Well, I think, as you do know, the minority parties in Parliament are supposed to critique government policies and programs and to help put government on its toes in governance. So we have the best from any ruling administration. So whether it's NDC also look at the MPP administration, the role should be to oversee government's performance in all sectors and see whether as a country we'll have real value for money and that we'll have transparent and accountable government to the good people of this country.
But we hardly hear about the other minority parties. It's always MPP.
Unfortunately, as you do know, since this dispensation, the minority, the smaller parties, have always had an excuse to team up with the ruling party. Even though by our arrangement, the minority parties are supposed to associate with the main minority party, the greater force, to constitute the minority caucus. But conveniently, they have found a way to position themselves in the ranks of the majority party, the ruling party. God knows for what reason.
So in effect, you're saying that the CPP and PNC are on the side of the NDC in Parliament, or they sit with the NDC in Parliament?
They sit with the NDC in Parliament. I would say of the chairperson of the CPP, Samia, when she was in Parliament, she struggled to position herself in between the MPP and the NDC. That was even a very strange arrangement. You see, what obtains in other jurisdictions, as I said, we have groups that they refer to as recognized minority parties. Usually by convention or by some written code, if a political party attained a certain number, and that is relative to the numerical strength of the seats in Parliament, you then say that if you attain 5 seats, you'll be recognized as a recognized minority party. If you attain 7, 9, depending on what arrangement that the particular jurisdiction may have, they may post a number to say that if you attain that number, you'll be recognized. If you didn't, then you have to be swallowed in the belly of the major opposition party, so that you constitute the opposition parties or party en bloc, but then your identity will be swallowed in the greater force. If it came to articulating issues, though, you may be at liberty to espouse the policy program of your own political party. Unfortunately, as I said, in Ghana, it's like they want to associate with the ruling administration.
But in Parliament, the physical arrangement itself gives you only 2 sides.
That is so with every parliament. Every parliament has the ruling party and the opposition. And I'm saying that within the opposition ranks, you could have recognized parties. So if, for instance, we in Ghana agreed that if you had 7 seats, you'd be recognized, then within the minority group, let's say now that the MPP is in minority, if you had a CPP, the CPP will have to sit with the minority MPP group to the left side of the speaker, but within that scheme, because they have perhaps 7 or more seats, they'll be recognized. So that if we have to accord any recognition to them, they'll be given such recognition. But if your numbers do not fall up to the determined figure, then you will not be given that recognition. It will translate into so many things. For instance, the leader of that party will have to be recognized.
In the leadership of parliament.
In the leadership of parliament. That is, if you attain that number. If you don't, then, as I said, you'll be treated as just part of the opposition party.
But they have elected not to be treated as part of the opposition.
Absolutely. And that is, I believe that it's not the best of arrangements. Because the opposition party, you're supposed to project your own outlook, help to put government on its toes. If you join ranks with them, what do you achieve by that?
There may be a coalition of some sort.
Well, they don't call it a coalition here.
Yeah.
They don't call it a coalition here.
Eventually could be
they tell us that for purposes of transacting business, they want to associate with the majority party, which itself is a very incongruous arrangement.
Okay. So what are the main concerns of the minority that you lead? What are your main concerns? You've had a number of press conferences. What are the main issues?
Well, what we've had this year relates in particular to the budget and the State of the Nation address. Of course, they were encapsulated almost everything, because the State of the Nation address by the President is supposed to give us the state of the health of our country, including the economy, all sectors of our collective existence. So the President, for instance, comes to Parliament and he's telling us that, the fundamentals of the economy are very strong and that the medium-term prospects are very good. We don't agree, given the circumstances of our times. Of course, you remember that the President, when he had made this bold statement, then went on to provide statistics, right, in respect of GDP growth rate and so on. We dispute it. And we say that, Mr. President, whatever you've been talking about does not really translate to, the sustainable growth, the consistent growth that you're talking about. And we juxtapose the figures, and we tell him that your administration has not been consistent. For instance, if you are talking about GDP growth as a measure of your success in economic management, how can you really paint a good picture to Ghana? In 2000, when the MPP inherited the NDC administration, the growth rate that was bequeathed was 3.7%. Just the following year, it went to 4.2%. The following year, that is 2002, it went then to 4.5, then 5.2, then 5.6, then it went to 5.9%. Into 2006, it was 6.4. Then 2007, there was a slight decline, 6.3%. 2008, 7.3%, you remember? And then when the economy was rebased, it lifted up to 8.4%. That was for a non-oil economy. 2009, we climbed down to 4%. Then 2010, it went up just a bit, from 4% to, I guess, 4.3%. 2010, about 4.8%. 2011, there was a massive climb up, 14.4%. That was attributable in the main to the oil that has started pumping up. And indeed, if there is a new addition, it's like beginning from ground zero. There will be a bounce up. You remember a Champon's time when there had been this great famine. Then into 1976, there was a huge bounce, and that gave us a growth rate of 7.8%. And that had not been matched until 2008, when the economy was rebased. You see, again, you remember that in 1984, after the famine that afflicted us in 82, 83, there was a huge bounce. And that gave us a growth rate of about 6.2% from near zeros and ones. So that was nothing to boast about. Unfortunately, there was, the singing of hallelujahs, we have arrived. That was an oil economy. But the non-oil sector, if you decoupled it from it, then grew at about 7%. 2012, we contracted. The economy contracted. And from the 14.4, there was a massive climb down to about 7.9%. The non-oil sector then grew at around 4.5%. 2013 now is 7.1%, even to be reviewed downwards.
First of all, let's get this straight.
So you see,
what are you in dispute about? The figures or the impact of the figures?
The figures,
or both?
The figures should tell us that we are not doing well. Because see, since 2008,
so you're not disputing the figures.
No, we're not disputing the figures.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that it should have told us that at the point of exit of the MPP, when the economy grew, the non-oil economy grew by 8.4%. Ever since, we have not gotten there. The only time that we got there and indeed surpassed the 8.4 was 2011, when we had a full blast addition of oil production. And that took us to 14.4%.
But why is it necessary in discussing the economy to decouple the oil sector? Because the oil sector is part of the economy.
Because it's not for nothing that the Minister of Finance, in introducing the budget, would himself decouple.
But why is it necessary to do that?
It is necessary to do that so that you know that with or without the oil, this is how much you are growing.
But
we do not want to be afflicted.
We have the oil.
Because see, you have been heard talking about the Dutch disease afflicting a sister country, which used to be the largest producer of granules in Africa. No longer. The largest producer of palm oil in Africa. No longer. The largest producer of rubber in Africa. No longer. The largest producer of yam in West Africa. No longer. Of coal in Africa. No longer. Of zinc, cobalt. No longer. They've now come to depend almost solely on petroleum resources. Without petroleum,
you're talking about Nigeria.
I did not want to name them, but now that you have named, I agree with you.
Yes.
So whenever there is some trouble in the oil sector, the economy is crumbling. It cannot be good for the economy. And let's not forget that the oil certainly would deplete along the line. Our own production of oil in the Jubilee field is estimated to deplete in between 20 and 25 years, depending on the production levels. So shouldn't we be looking at our non-oil economy? We should. If we want to aspire to sustainable development, we should.
But you can make the same argument for all the sectors of the economy. For example, if the growth rate is led by agriculture, and agriculture experiences a specific problem, that growth rate could slow. Not the same way. The same argument you're making about oil. You can make it for agriculture, you can make it for industry, you can make it for cocoa, you can make it for everything.
Not exactly the same breath, Kwesi.
Why?
Because the resources there are not depletable. The resources here are depletable. And that is why lately when this argument is coming up...
Mining?
Yes.
Mining, precious
so we
metals,
are always saying that we have been shortchanged. And that if we knew, upon hindsight, we are realizing that we should have maybe gotten more energetic in our negotiations with our mineral concerns than we have done. And we relate ourselves to South Africa to say that yes, Ghana has the richest mines of gold in the world, in Obuasi, the richest. I'm not talking about quantity, I'm talking about quality. And yet, look at what South Africa has managed to do with their economy, even their physical development with gold. What have we achieved with gold in Ghana? We have let go. And so, upon hindsight, we believe that whatever is left for us, let us attend to this in a stronger position, negotiate from a stronger position than we did in the past. Why should that be our concern? Because we realize, flashing back, that we didn't do well enough. That is why it is important to do that. You remember that in crafting the petroleum resources, the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, some of us were insistent that let's even decouple it from the mainstream budgetary process. Nobody was saying at the time that we should not consider oil. We should. And we needed the money for development. But we said to ourselves that in order to give ourselves ample space to concentrate on the traditional economy, let's consider this as bonus. Then the Minister of Finance will come every year to Parliament with his demands. We need to do this. We need to use the money to maybe build our railway network, which has collapsed. This year, this is what we are going to concentrate on. We are going to build a dual carriage railway line between Accra, Takoradi, Kumasi, with our oil revenue. Because if we did it that way, the finance minister will then be able to himself trace where the monies have been allocated to. Parliament will be positioned to also track the use of the money for reasons of accountability. If he goes into the annual budget fund, as eventually, we got it to, locate, it becomes difficult for even Parliament to trace and track the use of the oil revenue. And 20 years from now, if we are not careful, we may not be able to put our fingers on any material substance that we have applied the oil revenue on, such that we could happily beat our chest to say that this is what we have achieved with our oil revenue.
But why should it be just tracking oil revenue and not all revenue?
Because I agree with you that it should be essentially, it should be to all revenue, especially to the resources that are depletable. We have not managed well. And as a country, we should be doing far better than we have done. It has nothing to do with the NDC. It has nothing to do with the MPP. As a collective, Parliament as a collective should live up to our responsibility in these matters. But depending on which government is sponsoring a particular bill, a particular piece of legislation, they always use their numbers to railroad their way through. At the end of it, on hindsight, then realize that what you did wasn't the best. So let's live up to our responsibilities. No government, every executive will behave the same way. They want to always have their way. And if you have a very pliant and docile Parliament, thank God for them.
Honorable, the President was in Parliament and he did make a statement that we are down to the bone. How did you understand that?
We are not managing well. We are not managing well. You see, I spoke about just the GDP growth rate. By other measures in the aggregate used to measure inflation, foreign exchange stability, and so on. We can use all these measures, apply on ourselves to realize that we are not doing well. In the 10 criteria applied on the countries in the West African Monetary Zone, Ghana placed last in the League of Nations. The League of Nations that include Liberia, Guinea, Gambia, Sierra Leone, and Ghana. Nigeria is the only giant in it. Consider 2013. The GDP growth rate in these non-oil economies was 6.7%. Ghana averaged 5.8. Now we are reviewing it downwards to 4.9, which means we're the worst performer in the sub-region. And yet the finance minister, indeed the president also restated the same thing, that is attributable to the 2007 world financial crisis. How can anybody say that? And the tapering policies of the U.S. Federal Reserve.
But he said that we're down to the bone, which is an admission.
That's
which is an admission, so he wasn't lying.
Because I agree.
Yeah.
Why is it that we are down to the bone? We are simply not managing well.
No, but that's a separate matter.
Yes, we are simply.
The issue is whether or not the government is honest enough to admit that we are in difficulty. And
well, when he says, no, just oppose it with the opening statement that he made, that the fundamentals of the economy are very strong, and the medium prospects, the midterm prospects are very bright. What are we seeing today? So we tell him, Mr. President, what you are saying is most incongruous. It doesn't sit with your earlier admission that we are down to the bone. But by every measure, we are not doing well. I was saying that of the 10 indices, the criteria, the convergence criteria that are used to measure the rate of growth in the West African Monetary Zone countries, Ghana plays last. By December, we're the only country to have attained just 3 out of the 10 criteria. By March, we had slipped on 2. To the extent that we are the only country that has attained just 1. It's the worst performance by this country in 21 years.
We'll come to some of the figures, but for now we're going to take a short break. Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues. We are in conversation with the Honorable Kyei Bonsu, leader of the minority in Parliament, and we are discussing issues related to how the minority may or may not help for us to secure good governance. But the issue I was bringing out is simply that if all of the statistics cannot really tell us about the well-being of our people, why do the politicians dwell on them? Because even if you talk about the per capita income, what does it really mean in real terms? That incomes averagely grew by a certain percentage. The vast majority of our people may not have had any increase in their income.
Absolutely.
In fact, their incomes may be declining.
Absolutely.
So what is the point of dwelling on the gross domestic product, gross national product, per capita income, and so on? What is the point?
Because see, there is some point. The point I've told you that is the standard measure. So you must use that standard measure to apply to yourself. But you must do introspection to know what constitutes the backbone of your economy. As far as Ghana is concerned, regardless of this additional income that we are receiving from petroleum, we should acknowledge that our economy is still agricultural based. If we acknowledge that, and that's why I came to do this articulation on our investment in agriculture.
Should we forever concentrate on agriculture?
Not necessarily. I've not said so. And that is why I'm saying that we should start from somewhere. No economy that has been solely dependent on agriculture also is able to rise up from a certain level to a certain point. And that is why I said we certainly cannot do without manufacturing. If we recognize that agriculture remains our backbone, let's do serious investment in agriculture. Let the producers then go to feed manufacturing. We cannot do any serious heavy industry in this country. Why? Because industry that is metal based, to the extent that we are not able, as we speak today, to make much out of our iron ore reserves, we will not be able to do serious heavy metal industrialization. So it goes to the point that in that case, the best bet for us is to do agro-processing.
Shouldn't we be paying some attention to the development of our iron and steel?
I agree.
Iron and steel.
Because I agree that we should. As we speak today, we have not come around it that really assessing the quality of our iron ore, the deposits that we have. And if we have to do it, just building the factory and sustaining it, you then project. You cannot say that you want to build an iron and steel factory which you know perhaps will have a lifespan of 20 years. I mean, it will not do anything. You have to assess the deposits, the quality, how long it will last. If you invest in this, can it last beyond 50 years? If it can, you are home and dry. So all these assessments have not really been done. I do know that we have these ores. To what extent they can affect us, industrialization is something else. Let's do, now that we have some leverage provided by this bonus from oil production, can we just do up the level of research into this? And then, if it's sustainable, we plunge into it. Because iron and steel would also offer us massive space for not only development, the physical development, but employment generation. And we will certainly have serious rippling effects in many, many areas. And that should be our concern.
So recently there was some controversy involving the minority and the General Secretary of the National Democratic Congress about the Heritage Fund. His suggestion was that, look, if we're in crisis, we might as well spend what is in the Heritage Fund.
Kwesi?
Yes, sir.
We're in crisis. The quantum of money that we have in the SNET fund far exceeds what we have in the Heritage Fund. Why is nobody talking about that? That, oh, let's go there and perhaps maybe we take from it and use it for this current time with a promise to pay back. Why are people not talking about that? The Constitution is very clear on this. That, and I guess, if you don't mind, I have my Constitution here. Let me read from the Constitution. The Constitution provides in the preamble that, and I read, in the name of the Almighty God, we the people of Ghana, in exercise of our natural and inalienable right to establish a framework of government, we shall secure for ourselves, those of us living, and posterity, the blessings of liberty, equality of opportunity, and prosperity. So we're not doing anything for ourselves alone, but for posterity as well. We're talking about the harvesting of timber. Our forest is gone. At the turn of the last century, we had about 8.5 million hectares of forest cover. Today, as we speak, it's less than 1 million. The nation is making a conscious effort in afforestation, or should I say re-afforestation. And we certainly have to double our effort in that field. It is replenishable. You can replenish forest cover. You cannot replenish the minerals. And so we need to be much more discreet in the application of the resource. And that is why we should leave something for posterity. It is a recent development. It didn't used to be. But now the oil producing countries, those of them who are heavily dependent on oil, have realized that if we deplete this resource in 50 years, 100 years, generations yet unborn would come and wander on the surface of the soil, not having anything to do. So let's build for them and do serious investment. Investment one, and also leave some amounts in some funds for generations yet unborn. Ghana has taken a leaf from these practices of these countries, and we have set aside this fund. So I think it's most premature and, if you like, quite preposterous for anybody to suggest let's go and borrow from it. We cannot do that.
But if the funds were used to establish projects from which future generations would benefit, would that not be like catering for posterity?
Kwesi,
like the Ekosombo Dam,
Kwesi,
commissioned in 1963 or thereabouts, and generations which were born much, much later are benefiting from it.
Generations unborn will benefit from the Bui Dam.
Yeah.
Generations unborn will benefit from the other dams that are projected to be constructed on Pra, on Ankobra, on Oti, and so on. Right. Today, as we speak, there is a fund in the stabilization fund. Why is nobody talking about that? You see, we must be careful.
I'm talking about the principle.
No. Yes, I'm saying
you
that
can either keep the money there or you can spend the money.
We are in difficulty.
Now, if we spent the money,
because we are in difficulty.
Yes, we
all recognize that.
Yes.
Now, the stabilization fund is the one that is immediately available. Why are we hopping over the stabilization fund to now pry into the heritage fund?
Why can't we use all the funds, stability fund, heritage fund, whatever, to do things today which will benefit people who live today and people who will live tomorrow? Why is that not possible?
When we are in crisis, because see, why is it that you don't sell your house but you decide to go to the bank for a loan?
I don't go to the bank for loans.
you rather want to use this as a last resort. Let me go to the bank, take a loan, and try to venture into some other area to see how things may go. I don't want to sell my house, the house that I've built for myself and my children, and perhaps my children's children. That may be immediately available. You don't sell it. If you sell it, you can rent maybe a 2-bedroom facility to, in such a situation or circumstance that you find yourself. Make do and try to venture into other areas. But knowing that what area you want to venture into is still not 100% secure, you want to be circumspect in doing that.
But sir, you have also argued against taking too much loans. You are saying that we have taken too many loans now.
Yes.
So that is not an option as far as you are concerned.
No, because see, the issue is, I'm not in principle against taking loans. I'm not in principle against it. And the minority is not in principle against it. We are always talking about having value for money in the investment that we do with such loans, such that at the end of the day, we'll be able to reap enough harvest to pay for the loans that we have taken. If we are not so positioned and just take loans to balance our budget, to pay for, salaries and wages, that's dangerous. That is dangerous.
But
and
couldn't we
today, as we speak,
yes,
the interest on the loans that we are taking alone for this year is estimated to be around between 6.2 billion and 7.2 billion. That is about 62 cedis. That's about 72 trillion Ghana cedis just in interest payment. I'm not saying that all the investment is bad. Let's look at, for instance, contracting this CDB loan of 3 billion. I'll be crazy to say that the principle involved was wrong. If you want to build landing sites, if you want to use some to revive our railway network, if you want to use some to construct irrigation facilities,
the gas infrastructure,
fishing harbors, gas infrastructure, it is good. What we questioned at the time was government itself doing serious due diligence. If you want to build landing sites, and I ask you, you say, well, I want to build 5 landing sites. What's the cost involved? Oh, it's about between 100 million and 250 million. And you use the upper ceiling, the 250 million, to do your calculation. And invite consultants now to evaluate the scheme. What would they tell you? They'll use the 250. They use the 250. And Ghana will have to pay for the 250. Right? Meanwhile, if you did serious due diligence, you perhaps have realized that 150 million could do the work. The gas infrastructure. How come that Dr. Sipa Yanke is telling us that, I'm making some savings? What savings is he making? How much has gone into it? We gave a band. And the savings that he's talking about is that, well, I'm not using the upper ceiling.
Looking at the upper ceiling.
I'm not using the upper ceiling. Meanwhile, because you are aware that recently they've had to bury some pipelines. You are aware of that? Do you know the cost?
No, how much?
I'm told that it's in the region of about $15 million. The gas pipes that were buried. That's the figure that I've been told. And still he's telling us that in spite of that, I'm still making some savings. It tells you that there's something wrong.
Could we be sure about that figure?
About which
figure? The gas pipelines which have been buried.
Kwesi, even if it is $1 million, and the man still is telling you that in spite of that, I'm making some savings, it tells you that there was something wrong at the very outset. So we didn't do serious due diligence.
Couldn't we use the same argument?
Yes.
For all the other funds, the SNIT fund, the Heritage Fund, the Stability Fund, and so on, couldn't we say that if they were properly invested, then there will be no problem?
Absolutely. Because I agree with you.
So it's not about touching the Heritage Fund or touching SNIT Fund or any other fund for that matter.
I agree with you.
But making sure that we have prudent investment.
You constitute a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you call them, an investment team. You are paying them, those of them who are serving on that team, to invest the Heritage Fund. And at the end of the day, what allowance you are giving them is far more than what the fund is harvesting. It tells you that what you have done is wrong investment, if any.
But is that the reality? Because I understand that we have about 120 million in the Heritage Fund.
Yes, that is the money. That is the total quantum that has gone into it. It's been invested. And at the end of the day, for 2013, we are told that, well, we're able to have about, is in the region about 140,000 or so dollars, the returns. Even if you invested in the bank, you just put it in the bank, what was going to be the interest? What was going to be the interest? So it was going to be over 17%.
But isn't this a strong argument?
Yes.
That keeping it in an offshore account, which yields 140,000, is not worth anything, and that we might as well prudently invest it.
What is there to question is the direction of investment. What was it invested in? What advice went into that investment? That's what we should question. Because it should be possible, having invested $120 million, to reap at least 20 million. Even if you deposited it safely in the bank, it should give you that. So people are not being candid with Ghanaians.
We are exceptionally privileged to have with us the minority leader, Honorable Kyei Bonsu, and we are looking at the contribution of the minority to good governance, and we're looking at all the issues. We're trying to look at all the issues that have been raised by the minority within the last few months. So we're talking about former President Kufuor's participation in the rebranding of Merchant Bank. What was the problem?
Well, I wasn't available. I had traveled outside when it happened. So when I came, the question was posed to me, what I made of it. And I said I didn't want to jump into any conclusions. There are still outstanding matters relating to the sale of Merchant Bank, and in the view of some of us, the dissipation of workers' contribution in that project. And we'll still come out ultimately with what we have seen and what we believe ought to have been done or ought not to have been done. So I said to the interviewer that, well, not having been in the jurisdiction, I guess the better thing would be for us in leadership to go and sit with President Kufuor to inquire what informed that. Perhaps he knows something that some of us don't know, having been the former president. But I was quick in making the point that President Kufuor wears three hats: as a former president, as the former leader of the party, and as an individual who may have his own personal acquaintances, even though by the position that he's occupied, the presidency, the others perhaps will have to coalesce and be subsumed in that personality, the personality of a former president. We went there and had, a very healthy discussion with him, and he told us that, well, he was invited by, a friend, and that's how come he found himself there. He agreed with us that the whole process was most unclean and that he even urged us to continue with our investigation. And I'll tell you, Kyei, that he drew our attention to certain areas that he said we should be focusing on, just so that the workers of this country, the contributors to that scheme, will have value for their money, and their contributions will not go waste. So that was the extent of the discussions that we had with him. And we are poised to continue with our investigations and inquiries into what we've been doing.
But what could have informed the suspicion?
Of?
The suspicion that his participation in the rebranding of the bank could compromise the position of the minority or the MPP?
Well, the minority has not said so. The minority in Parliament hasn't said so. I understand individuals, and I'm talking about individual MPP members, made those allegations. I told you that I wasn't even in Ghana at the time.
But they were wrong.
No, I'm telling you that the minority, as a group, you pose a question to us that why did the minority do that? And I'm saying to you that, the minority,
the basis of the suspicion.
Yes, of the minority. And I'm saying to you, Kyei, that the minority as a group, and I do not even know whether or not as individuals, the minority in Parliament have made that allegation.
So that allegation is unfounded?
That allegation attributable to the minority in Parliament is totally wrong. Indeed,
but
Joy
that
FM
allegation in all its forms was
Joy
unfounded.
Joy FM it was that interviewed me. And this is what I said. Unfortunately, the caption to their story on the net was "Minority angry with Kufuor." The following day, it was "Minority to summon Kufuor." Another newspaper headline was "Minority to query Kufuor." Kyei, what I've told you expresses anger, and that we're going to summon him, query him, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, when the newspapers came with this banner headline, they got in touch with the former chief of staff, who, not having heard from us, then also jumped onto the fray to say that, well, if the minority is saying that we have breached any provisions in the party's constitution, they may want to show us which provisions we have breached. But that was just carrying the battle downstream. But we have not even made that allegation. So, as far as I'm concerned, that concoction was just a figment of somebody's fertile imagination. But that's all that there was to it. Notwithstanding, as I said, we have all agreed that we still need to pry into it and let the people of this country know the final outcome of our investigations.
Currently, there is another controversy. The referral of the Constitutional Amendment Bill, Entrenched Provisions, Amendment Bill, to the Council of State by the Speaker. You have stated publicly that you disagree with the Speaker and the manner in which he handled the matter. What is the disagreement about?
Kyei, the Constitution provides in Article 292 that once you have such amendment in a proposal form in a bill, it should come to Parliament. And it says before Parliament proceeds to consider it, the Speaker should refer it to the Council of State. Now, the language and tenor of that construction, in my view, means that if it's said that before Parliament proceeds to consider it, the Speaker may refer it to the Council, shall refer it to the Council of State for advice, it presupposes that the document must be in possession of Parliament first.
In possession of the Speaker?
No, the Speaker is not Parliament.
Yes, but the Constitution says the Speaker. It doesn't say Parliament.
No, the Constitution doesn't say the document should be in the possession of the Speaker.
No, but it says that.
Let me refer to the Constitution.
Fantastic.
I mean, for the elucidation of listeners, because Article 290 provides. 292 provides a bill for an amendment of an entrenched provision shall, before Parliament proceeds to consider it. So ab initio.
No, but continue.
Yes.
Before Parliament proceeds to consider it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be referred by the Speaker to the Council of State for its advice.
Exactly.
Yes. I'm suggesting to you that language and tenor indicates that it should be in possession of Parliament.
No, it says before Parliament considers it. That is before it is placed before Parliament for consideration.
It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that. In fact, read 2 in tandem with 3.
Carry on.
3 says, the bill shall be published in the Gazette, but shall not be introduced into Parliament until the expiry of 6 months. Now, bringing it to, even if you deem it that the Speaker can be decoupled from Parliament and that should go to the Speaker, are you introducing it to Parliament?
Assuming that
in 292, is it deemed to be introduced into Parliament? If you deem it to be introduced into Parliament, then the Constitution provides that even before you do that, you should publish it in the Gazette. It's not been published in the Gazette.
You are perfectly right.
Yes.
But I'm saying that the Speaker can refer it to the Council of State before it is introduced into Parliament. That's the language.
No.
That's the clear language in the Constitution.
No. It says, that is why I say to you that you see, by the correct reading and appreciation of these 2 provisions, indeed, the chronology of it should tell you that 3 should precede 2.
The gazetting, it starts with gazetting.
Gazetting. In fact, look at
reference to the Speaker.
Yes.
Reference to the Council of State.
Gazetting, introduction to Parliament. Then, before we proceed to consider it, the Speaker refers it to the Council of State.
So, what is the purpose of reference to Parliament at the time when Parliament is not ready to consider?
Absolutely. In fact, this whole construction is faulty. But you see, read Article 291.
Yes,
which is on amendment to non-entrenched provisions. That one says that a bill to amend provision of this Constitution, which is not an entrenched provision, shall not be introduced into Parliament unless 1, it has been published twice in the Gazette, and with the second publication being made at least 3 months after the first. So whereas the entrenched provision, the time lapse is 6 months, this one says at least 3 months. And then at least 10 days have passed after the second publication. The Speaker shall, after reading the first bill in Parliament, refer to the Council of State.
Yeah, but this one, the language is explicit.
Yes.
He has to read it in Parliament.
That is the
first instance.
The first reading.
With the entrenched provisions,
yes.
There's no provision for first reading.
No, the first reading then comes. That's why I'm talking to you in this vein. That
there are 2 processes.
4 then says,
one for the entrenched provisions,
yes,
and one for the non-entrenched provisions.
Yes.
They are not one and the same.
See, that is why I'm saying that the chronology. You see, when we read a constitution, we don't just read just one clause and say that I'm home and dry. You put the series together, especially if it is one article. You read everything together. Indeed, Article 290, Clause 1 just lists the entrenched provisions. Then 2 then goes to 2, 3, 4, 5, tells you the processes, right? If you are introducing it to, why would you introduce it to Speaker Jaho? And that is why I'm saying that even the referral from the Attorney General to the Speaker was wrong. Because he said to the Speaker,
especially as it had not been gazetted.
He said to the Speaker that I'm referring,
as the Council of State has only 30 days within which to profile and advise.
And what he says is that, you see, that's why I'm saying that you should read everything in tandem. Because immediately it comes from the Council of State. Immediately it comes to the Council of State and is read for the first time. Parliament cannot do anything about it. Then the referendum has to come. So where then is the space?
But then there would have been a clear breach of the Constitution.
Absolutely.
Because it has not been gazetted.
That is why I'm telling you.
That is the issue. It's not about...
Precisely.
Yes.
That's why I'm saying that you should read everything together. If you read it together, otherwise, you constrict the space, the 6-month space. Because it says to you that when it goes to the Council of State and it comes to Parliament, we cannot do anything about it. It just must be read. First reading, and then the referendum comes on. So where's the 6-month space?
Now, Honourable, finally,
right.
The National Economic Forum opened this week in Senchi or Kosombo.
Senchi.
Your party is not present. Is that a good thing?
I should think, given the circumstances, there's nothing that the party could have done other than the decision that I was taking. Kwesi, if I invited you to my wedding, and I said to you that Kwesi is coming off tomorrow, this is your card, you will in all likelihood tell me that, oh, I would have loved to come, but I've programmed myself for some activities in the course of...
If I have programmed myself.
That is if you have programmed myself.
And if it's you, I will most likely cancel the programs and come.
I'm rebranding my wedding tomorrow.
I will
have
be
my
there.
invitation.
I'll be there.
Because you see, I mean, this is a serious business.
Mm-hmm.
It's serious business. A political party, by our constitution under Article 55, is charged with the responsibility of formulating economic programs, right? And then disseminate the economic programs. We have been critiquing government for what course they have chosen to develop this country. Anytime they will respond by saying that, oh, we are on course, and that the fundamentals are good, the medium-term prospects are solid, and so on. Today, you make a U-turn to say that, well, we are in difficult, we'll call it challenges or crisis or whatever. The value is the same. That we have problems. I want you to come. If you want me to come and you want me to engage fully, because see, you give me some base documents. Again, no base documents are given. Even the program, there's no attached program.
Unfortunately,
you invite me to a program, you date it, the letter is dated May 2nd, it's transmitted from the office of the president on 7th May, and it takes 2 days after being dispatched from the office of the president to get to the party headquarters late Friday afternoon, 9th May. And we are supposed to get there on Monday.
Unfortunately, our time is up. And I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Honorable Minority
Thank you for having me.
For being in the studio and sharing your thoughts with us.